that they have to
So what if you have someone that has a wavering sense of good?
What do you mean by wavering?
You have someone who doesn't have an absolute sense of good. You know, like a divinity or a core experience that grounds them to something good.
Yeah.
Someone like a prisoner who has been through judgment, but hasn't found anything to ground themselves in. Doesn't have to be a prisoner. Anyone who just doesn't have a strong concept of truth. Do you still think they bend a lot to rhetoric, that they could be misguided by rhetoric these days? That rhetoric might be more important to them than truth?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's true for a lot of people. I'm not so convinced that people aren't. I'm not so convinced that people believe in good and evil anymore. I think
when you say rhetoric, you mean along the sense of like authority.
That could be part of it. Part of it would just be word games that you play so that it makes it seem like you know what you're talking about when you don't. So one example would be, I lay out a proposition. I mean, this is kind of a cheap example, but it falls within the pathological aspects of rhetoric in this particular category. I make a claim that if you push on it a little bit, wouldn't make any sense, it would fall apart immediately. But rather than letting you poke at it, I quickly move on to the next object in the conversation, and then it just seems awkward if you go back and we've already moved on to the next one. Something like that. That's a good example of rhetoric over truth, say. That we're having this dialogue, we're not pursuing truth, we're pursuing power games, or we're pursuing me dominating you and winning, or something like that. Something that isn't the truth.
It seems a little paradoxical, though, because by analogy, what you just described is maybe we're playing a game, we're wrestling for control in the conversation.
Yeah.
Why might we be playing that game? Well, maybe we both have perceptions of truth, and like you said, the rhetoric involved is very important on presenting on the measure of that truth, right?
Sure.
So for me to be more true, I have to also be more in control of what that truth means. I have to be more in control of the conversation and the context that we have, which to me seems a very natural and understandable thing.
Well, if the object of my podcast is to relate the truth to the audience, then it would seem that would be the best thing to do. It would be, okay, I invite you on, you're a nice scientist, and I know some about your work, and I just direct the conversation so as to extract from you the knowledge that I already know, so that it can be presented in the best possible manner to the audience. But I think a much more interesting way to have a podcast and have a conversation in general is, okay, I bring you on and you have some interesting ideas and maybe some areas that I don't know too much about, and I can poke at you and question you and see if your ideas actually hold up under some scrutiny, and maybe you'll do the same to me, and maybe you'll come up with, maybe I'll poke at you and you'll come up with something new, or maybe I'll poke at you and you'll have an argument that I haven't already encountered, and I'm learning as a consequence of this as well, rather than assuming a priori that I already know the truth. I think that's what a dialogue is. So dialogue, you break it down into via and logos. Logos would be whatever logos is, word, argument, something associated with speech. There's a couple of different. Logos is a hard thing to translate. Something to do with the truth. But via means through. So it's when we're having a conversation, it's something like we're acting through the logos towards the truth, something like that.
Wonder if dia has any etymological link to Dio, which I believe translates as God in Italian.
Yeah, that's Latin. Latin Deus is God. I don't know. It might be a Proto-European type of thing. I wouldn't doubt it, but I'd be more inclined to say. So if you look at the word for Zeus in Greek, the nominative, the subject, if you're using it as a subject, it's Zeus. But if you make it declension, so if I say Zeus did this, you would say Zeus did this. But if I say I gave Zeus, I would say I gave to via Dios. That, as long as it's not the subject of the sentence, you're using some form of Dios.
How would you know if you said I gave I gave sacrifice to Zeus, or I gave sacrifice to Hades.
Those are two different words. So you would say ton dia, ton evi.
So Thea is a specific word for Zeus?
Yes. It's another form of the word Zeus.
Oh, it's a grammatical
Yes.
form.
So Greek is really weird. You could take all of the words in a sentence, really, and just throw them up in the air and have them in a complete random order, and you can still understand the sentence. So, for example, I gave the rock to Anthony. I, in that case, is not. So we have it a little bit in English. I and me is a good example. I is the subject, that'd be the nominative case. Me would be anything that's not nominative. But accusative, for example. I gave the rock. The rock, in this case, is accusative. In English, we don't change it at all, but if Έδωσα τον Petron. I gave the rock. Petros to Petron is just a change in declension. So your gave. That's an accusative form. A dative form would be to Anthony. So I don't know what Anthony is in Greek.
Antonio. That's
I think that's Latin though. Antonio, like Marcus Antonius.
Antone. I see another version of Anthony as like Antone.
Like I said, that's Antonius is in Latin. So
Wow, my name is old. I didn't know.
yeah. Marcus Antonius, he was critical in the Civil War, bringing about the Roman Empire.
Wait, isn't there a Mark Antony? Was like
Mark Antony, yeah, Marcus Antonius, Mark Antony.
Isn't that the guy in that was with Julius Caesar?
Yep. So
Oh, why did you say? Oh, Civil War.
Roman Civil War.
Roman.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry. Yes. So Caesar, he starts to amass power in the Republic, and people aren't liking that. He starts to make enemies in the Senate. He enacts the Gallic Wars. So it's about 8 years of him essentially doubling the Roman Empire's territory, moving
Is
it
it
to
Gallic
France.
or Gaelic? I've heard.
I've heard Gallic because it's the Gauls, Gauls, Gaul, Gaul, Gaul.
Sounds pretty gay.
Yeah.
Like,
I doubt it because Gaelic seems like it's more like English and Irish and stuff based on.
are they different? Because I'm thinking of the.
I don't know because I know Gauls. The Gauls are also Celtic in origin and not.
Oh yeah, I am thinking of the Gauls, the Celts.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of them. They're a playable race in a Civ game or something.
Sure.
Or actually, not Civ, Age of Empires, probably. I've heard Julius Caesar described as a megalomaniac.
So there's this story when I think he's a teenager at this time. He's captured by pirates. You know the story.
Just briefly, or I don't know at all.
He's captured by pirates, and he's so that he can be ransomed back to his family and whatnot. And he's told the ransom that he's being ransomed for. He said, no, I'm worth more than that. You up that, and they did. And he told them the entire time. They took it as a joke, but he was dead serious. I'm going to, once I'm released, I'm going to come back and kill all of you. And he would say that he kind of got. He had some time with them. Obviously, he kind of got on a personal relationship with them, but telling them the whole time, I'm going to come back and kill all of you. They all thought it was ridiculous, but soon enough, once he's released and gets the ransom, he goes back, takes all the pirates, kills them all. He sits with them in their prison cell. So, like I said, he got personal with them, got friendly with them, but until the day he put them to death. Yes, you could say he's a megalomaniac. There are plenty of ways that people like to interpret the Gallic Wars as his attempt at amassing power and popularity in among the Roman populace.
So when people say he's a megalomaniac, they take that as his motivations were self-serving.
That's how many people look at it, yes.
How can you look throughout history and not feel that way for basically all the rulers? No. Like that. The skeptic in me says, what's so different?
Well, that's kind of like the standard postmodern interpretation, is that people are just in it for self-serving means. And you look at Caesar and you could probably make a claim to that. Maybe you could say he wants do it for the good of Rome, maybe for the good of Gaul.
I'll put it another way.
Less.
I think to meet you in what you had said, it's a modern take or something.
Postmodern, yeah, that's what it means.
I feel rather it's up to the burden of the ruler to prove they're not selfish. Like when you take someone like, and I don't really use this vocabulary because it is oversaturated in society. I think it means too little for what people use it for. But when you have a difference in power, you have the subjugate and the ruler. It takes no effort for the ruler to be successfully selfish. It takes lots of effort to overcome that power.
Yeah.
From the subjugate perspective. And that's not going to happen. They're not going to do that unless there's really a good reason. They're not going to do it selfishly, right? Unless there's a really good reason, like they can support another ruler by doing it who has promised them something better. But when you look at a ruler, it's just like, I cannot imagine being raised as a ruler with so much power over people who are so much weaker, and you understand that there's a huge burden on you to be a benevolent ruler. Right. Like, in other words, it would have to be, like when I put myself in those shoes, I wouldn't be benevolent. I would be good, right? I would do good things. I would be a megalomaniac, probably.
Can you make those distinctions a little clearer for me?
Yeah, like, I do lots of good things. I give homeless people money sometimes. I volunteer time. I donate to charity. I provide for friends and family. All those things, I feel good about doing it. I don't have to question doing it because I get something out of doing it.
Okay.
And,
as opposed to doing something because it's your duty to do so. That's what you're pointing to as benevolence?
Yeah. So for me, so if you came to me and you said, I think you're a selfish person, I would say that sounds about right. If you said I'm a megalomaniac, I'd say probably that doesn't sound right. A megalomaniac is so selfish in my mind that they're so self-important that they risk their what's good so that they can get what they need. I don't think I do that, but I think I'm selfish. I think that I have to prove how I'm not selfish, and I can't do that. I can't come to you and say I naturally lose sleep at night every day thinking about the troubles in the world. It causes me to want to go and do these things. I know those people exist, and it doesn't take a lot to prove that you're not selfish. It takes consistency mostly, but so when I look at the context of these rulers, and it's like, okay, we're not talking about being selfish. I think all the rulers, to some degree, like I think it's just a ruler is a non-optimal equilibrium where now everyone involved, if they keep playing the structure correctly, they all benefit from it, but it's out of self-interest. It's like the ruler gets to be a ruler, but he also has a lot of responsibilities, and he's probably the first to die whenever the ruler goes to the next ruler, and there's that kind of stuff. When I think of someone being a good ruler, I think of someone that does good for their citizens, and I can oppose this as an example of a bad ruler, like Bloody Mary or whatever.
Who's that? Can you just, I don't know.
Queen Elizabeth? But her name's Mary. I don't know why she's bloody.
I don't know.
The one that killed everyone because she changed the rules of Protestantism. She's named you don't know about Bloody Mary, like the game people play?
I'm pretty sure someone's explained it to me at some point in time, but I don't know it off the top of my head.
All right, so she was so bad to her people that she got the moniker.
Nickname.
Bloody Mary, which you might know because people play the game Bloody Mary, right? It's like a witch tale now. Or it's like you go into the bathroom when it's dark and you say Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary. It's because that's how people felt over her rule, that she would kill anyone. She would kill or she would kill okay, she would kill Protestants for not being Protestant enough according to the rules,
Okay.
and she would also kill non-Protestants for not being Protestant. She started, I think, beheading people and like killing people
Sure.
over wanted religious supremacy, and it was, and by many accounts, she was a saint, like a very holy person, but she was bad to her people. Now, when I think, did she do that for a selfish reason? Probably not. She was probably very much believing that was the proper way society should be held. You need to be Protestant for whatever reason. The point is, it was to her own detriment, likely, to be doing those rules. She probably did not benefit a lot. I don't think she became a better, more popular ruler. I don't think she gained more control in a meaningful way. She was still a bad ruler, even though she was not maybe selfish with that rule. So there's this. So, it's a burden to really prove that you are benevolent. I feel like I can't even think off the top of my head a benevolent ruler. It's like a fairy tale. It's like when I watch a show and you have a ruler who actually cares for their people. It feels like a fairy. Now I know I'm watching fiction.
Sure. Well, to argue against that, it seems like Pericles, who was ruled in the golden age of Athens, seems like he was a pretty good ruler. He's, despite sort of ruling as an autocrat, although the Athenian government was more complicated than just a democracy, and it definitely wasn't an autocracy, but he sort of ruled as an autocrat going into the Peloponnesian War and was very popular despite that.
And his enemies give the same, like, here's another thing that a friend of mine is very, very, very much a skeptic of. The older back you go, he's more of a skeptic of what that is, of what's being accounted there as being true. I tend to agree. Dan Carlin will also give this warning. When you get really old, like biblical old, you only have a few authors describing a person. Like, who knows if they're biased or not? One good way, I don't know who said this, but I took it somewhere, is that if your enemies are saying, oh, this guy was also it was a decent guy. He was probably a decent guy.
Sure.
But if his allies who they both betrayed and completely eradicated a war is saying, oh, he's the best guy, he would never, then you have a reason to doubt. So in other words, I agree that there has to be numerous rulers who were benevolent. I think people are benevolent, and rulership is not outside of concern. I think it's a huge burden to prove. Why? Well, there's not a lot of information to go off of, first of all. And I think the burden rests on, if you're going to call yourself one of the greats, like, I was good to people. You have to really prove it. It's not something that you can just say, I was a good ruler, I didn't kill anyone. It's like, okay, great.
I take your point.
And I don't think you can really do that in terms of like being a successful ruler. I think you can be benevolent, but then if your next spawn isn't ready to go to war because people are taking advantage of you for being benevolent, then you're gonna get taken advantage of, and you're gonna fall out of time. It's like,